Let's see. Today is one of those busy days. I don't even know if I have time to have breakfast or make the coffee because I have to be there on time for that meeting. And I don't even have my proposal done for it yet. Don't you just hate those days when your calendar has more on it than you can do? And I've got to move this other meeting because I've got to drive over there for that appointment. And who's going to walk the dog? And who's going to feed my cat? And when your life feels like you are in the hamster cage, don't just do something, stand there. That's the advice to follow. Because often we end up feeling like this guy in the little door of the lighthouse, right? With the waves and the storm crashing around us. And no matter how hard we work, how much planning and figuring and conniving and working it again and trying to shove the square peg in the round hole of our life, it just doesn't work sometimes. And when you're rubbing up against that thing that just doesn't want to work and your back is against the wall, oh, that's time to just stop and find some other place of operational energy than the mind that wants to be busy planning and fixing and doing all of the time. To just stand there, be still, and allow the movement of God within you to guide your next steps. I know from vast experience that it's much easier if I will just stop and wait to see what the presence of God, the Spirit within, will show up and communicate as how to move forward. And when I will do that, I get to move forward with ease and grace, rather than struggle and frustration and agitation and, oh my God. So I work now regularly at reminding myself to just stop and stand still for a moment and to let go of the busy thoughts, to let go of the mountain of things on my to-do list and let my to-doing come forth from a place of stillness within me. And this is a lesson, I don't know about the rest of you, but this is the lesson I know I get to practice over and over and over because I have frequent episodes of spiritual amnesia. Anybody else? You know, I'm going along, it's working smoothly, but I just have a tendency to get wrapped up in all those many details until I forget who I am. I forget what I came here to do, and I forget the easeful way to go up to going about and doing it. Sometimes I do remember, however, to pick up a useful tool as a reminder, and there is such a reminder in Exodus about this particular aspect of our life. Now, I discovered unity a little over 10 years ago. And I had never heard of metaphysical Bible interpretation until I sat down my first Sunday in a Unity church. And when the minister started on a scriptural passage, I kind of, oh, wait. And then I heard him speak about metaphysical Bible understanding. Okay, that had my interest. And when he explained that within the story, it's not only important to see the context and the literal story and take it at that level of understanding, but there is the rich opportunity to see every person, every location, every thing within that story as a symbol, a metaphor for some deeper and greater truth. And a very powerful story in Exodus that might shed light on how we can manage life and its frustrations and agitations and overwhelm from time to time is one of the stories about Moses. Now you remember that he floated down the river in the basket and was taken in by Pharaoh's princess and grew up in the palace. So he became somebody important in the life of Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt, in his lifetime. And there came a point when he met God. And God said, you and I have a mission, fella. And here's what it looks like. You are going to invite Pharaoh to release all the Israelites from bondage so that you may take them to a promised land. And Moses took this mission and confronted Pharaoh and was not particularly well received, repeatedly. And at each not received well occasion, God visited upon the land of Egypt one of those plagues. And they culminated in the Passover experience where all of the male children firstborn in the Egyptian households were killed, but the Israeli households, all the firstborn boys were saved. This caught Pharaoh's attention. Something important was going on here, and he had kind of had enough at that point of Moses and all the Israelites, and he said, fine, out, go, be gone with you, good riddance, take your cattle and your sheep and go. And so Moses, according to the plan, took them all, and they began the journey. They found themselves camped one night on the banks of the Red Sea. They awoke in the morning. You know, they're free, they're joyous about this new experience, they're looking forward to where they've been promised to go. And they look out, and staring them down from a distance is Pharaoh riding full tilt boogie in his chariot with his army behind him, and they have terror struck in their hearts. And they're shrieking at Moses, you brought us out of slavery only to get us killed by Pharaoh's army on the banks of this river that we can't get across. But Moses has something to say. And it says in the scripture, Moses spoke to the people. Don't be afraid. Stand firm and watch how God rescues you today. Take a good look at those Egyptians, because you will never see them again after today. Well, when we look past just the simple words of the verse, the elements there that matter for our own lives, for taking the lesson into living our own life more easily, begins with those Egyptians and that Pharaoh guy. The Egyptians, the horde, the army, for us represent every fearful thought, every anxiety and anxious moment, every voice within us that says, you can't do that. You're not good enough. You're not tall enough or short enough. You're not cute enough or young enough. You don't have enough of enough already. That voice, doesn't it sound big and like an army, and as though it could just mow you down when your back is against the wall of your own Red Sea? But also in this story, we have Moses. And Moses represents for each of us that place within us that knows what is true, that knows within us is the presence and power of God. That whatever we're facing in our life, be it a pretty pink package or a trauma and a tragedy, we have within us a voice to speak to us with wisdom, a voice to speak guidance with clarity and inspiration, a voice to move us forward easily through the army that we're facing down. And another element in this story, what we take to understand in unity as a metaphysical understanding of the Lord spoken in the Old Testament, this refers to the universal principles of truth, the foundation on which all of it rests. So let's look at this last verse again. The Lord is speaking. We are all held in the blessed arms of universal principles of God itself, of that energy of love and light in the universe and in our lives. And we stand on the foundation of universal principles that we can trust in every situation in our life. And we may be facing the Egyptians coming at us, but we have within us the presence and the voice of God to raise us into a place of easeful passage. The waters part, and the way is made clear when we listen to that voice of Moses within us. This wisdom is found many places in the world. In the Vedic tradition, which is ancient Hinduism, there is a law known as the law of least effort. It means expending the smallest amount of energy to create the biggest result. It means using our resources wisely, starting in the place of wisdom, not the place of flailing and frustration. It means, as an industrial engineer I once worked for would have said, it means working smarter, not harder. Moving in our life with the wisdom that arises from this God presence within us. Now, there are plenty of examples of how this works in our world. Nature operates perfectly according to the law of least effort. Water flows naturally around the obstacles. It just simply goes on the path of least resistance, following the easeful, meandering direction, and gets exactly where it needs to go, from the beginning to the end, flowing with the least amount of energy expended. Grass knows how to grow quite naturally. If you give it the components that support growth, sun, water, nutrients, it just grows rampantly. If you've lived especially on the mainland, where it rains a lot and grass grows like crazy in the summer, you kind of wish it didn't have this natural ability to function so clearly implanted in it. But the message is that natural things know how to do what they are intended to do. And so it is with us. We are intended to create dreams and live to the fullest of our vision, and it is intended that the path be clear on the way to our dreams. No struggle need be the regular path, but I'm here to witness that struggle I often have in my amnesia until I remember. There's an easier way. Let me start at the easy point first. Other wisdom that represents the same idea comes out of an ancient Chinese philosopher. An integral being knows without going, sees without looking, and accomplishes without doing. This speaks to resting first in the wisdom within, so that the going and the seeing and the accomplishing happen with ease and grace. But you might ask, and so how do we get there? How do we get those waters stilled around the lighthouse where I'm standing still? I've finally gotten to that part. How do I part the waters to move through its riverbed easefully and gracefully? Well, I have 3 steps for you today. The first one is stop. Now, the easiest way to stop that frantic energy, that flailing in our life, to get off the hamster cage that we often experience, is so simple. Just drawing in our breath. Truly, the peace we seek is as close as our breath. It can center us in one quick moment into the memory, into the knowing of who we are, and into the peaceful way to move forward in our life. So a little exercise this morning. I invite you to breathe in with me, and I want you to fill your lungs absolutely to capacity. Breathe in, and then as you exhale, make sure you let all of that air out absolutely, fully. Empty your lungs until there's just no air left. And at that point where your lungs have to expand again to draw in the next breath, that point at the bottom of the cycle of the breath, there's a place of emptiness, of quiet, of stillness. And if you hold your mind in that spot for a moment, you can shed all the frenzy, all the worry, all the anxiousness, and just be in that still place, waiting for what wants to come next, what wants to show up to guide you forward easefully and gracefully. I was in a workshop a number of years ago, a writing workshop, and the facilitator wanted to carry us into that space of emptiness, that space of stillness. And she just used the vibration of a drum a simple rhythm, a simple vibration that allows us to sink further into that place of stillness. It's a simple thing. And you say, well, I don't have a drum. Yes, you do. You always have the drum as close as your heart. That's always beating, always has a consistent, still rhythm. And you can just focus on your heart and your breath to be that vehicle of moving you into stillness. One of my other favorite things is music and song. A prayerful chant or just a simple, beautiful instrumental melody. There's a reason we often support meditation with soft music, because it gives that busy place in our mind, this one that we're trying to still, a place to go into quiet. It leads us into that inner space, the empty place, where we can move forward with a different energy. So as we begin to incorporate stillness in our life, we can claim and affirm that I stand still in the midst of the storms. Would you join me claiming that in your life? I stand still in the midst of the storms. And breathe. And let my breath find the place of emptiness to move forward. The next step is to listen. So now that we've centered ourselves in the presence of God within us, we wait for that inner voice, that soft urging, that guidance to give us the next step. Perhaps you have a thought to call a friend, and in the conversation, this friend says something to you that just goes, well, of course, that's the answer I was looking for. Or you meet a friend in a coffee shop and you're sitting having a lovely conversation and they share the latest book they're reading, and even the title, the cover piece of the book says, yes, this is useful. This is what I need to help me where I want to head. Any space gets filled with that voice of guidance when we allow it and intend it. There was a woman who had become disillusioned with her Christian faith. She felt it didn't serve her, and she had discovered the principles of Buddhism. And she wanted to meet the Dalai Lama. I mean, she had a fierce, intense need to meet the Dalai Lama. And she held that intention, and finally it came about. She was granted an audience with His Holiness. And she found herself telling him the story that her Christian faith had no longer satisfied her, and she hadn't found tools to live successfully in the roots of her childhood teachings. But she had discovered Buddhism. And she knew, and she wanted His Holiness to illuminate her, but she knew that within Buddhism there lived something that could help her in her life. His Holiness says, we don't need any more Buddhists. I suggest you go home. What you seek is always within you. And you will find within the teachings that great truth exists everywhere. So in that environment in which you were raised, perhaps in your hometown, but certainly in your own heart, open and look at those teachings again and take the truth that you need, that serves you in this moment. It's as close as your breath. It was never anywhere else. As close as our breath. I listen to the impulse of the divine in me. Will you claim that with me this morning in your own life? I listen to the impulse of the divine in me. And then how do we move from the stopping and getting centered, the listening, so that we hear that wisdom and guidance that can rise up within us, and then what next? The what next is informed out of that silence and out of that wisdom, so that when we speak or move forward or act in our life, it comes from this place of wisdom. It doesn't come from the crazy-making pieces of life that have us running around like the proverbial chicken with our heads cut off. No, it comes out of this still place in the midst of us when we stop and listen. We allow it to spring forth into that voice, into that action that will make the way clear and easy. When we listen to the Moses voice within us, then the way is opened. And we get to move easily and gracefully in alignment with the universal flow of energy in which we're swimming all the time. And we only need to bring our awareness of that into connectivity, into reality, so that we can use it in the moment. I speak and act from the wisdom within me. Will you claim that in your life this morning? I speak and act from the wisdom within me. So I invite you to center yourself, perhaps again with a deep breath in and a deep breath out, to find that point of emptiness and focus there with the attention of your mind. I invite you to open your heart, breathing into the space of the mind of your heart, to feel the presence of God within you. And as we breathe into the emptiness and listen for the presence, we come together to meet God in the silence.